Hello and welcome to Acclime's podcast series Advancing Vietnam with me, Vlad Savin, as your host. Throughout the following episodes, we're looking to answering relevant questions about doing business in Vietnam. What are the opportunities and challenges faced by investors entering the market or existing players in major industries? We will seek to understand the business environment from a cultural, local mindset and how to deal with compliance from an international perspective. What are the major risks faced by businesses active in the region and how to overcome them? We will dive deep into the compliance environment in Vietnam, discussing processes and procedures, changes in laws, latest official updates from the authorities, and financial governance planning for businesses active in Vietnam. We at Acclime consider compliance a major asset for foreign investors operating in Vietnam. We emphasize this aspect when speaking with our clients, and we make sure they understand the significant benefits of being compliant. In this episode, I'm discussing with Matthew Lourey, managing partner at Acclime Vietnam, about how foreign investors operating in Vietnam ensure to maintain their compliance systems and business continuity plans during the latest lockdown in the major business hubs, and how to take advantage of the government support and other opportunities in the market. Matthew, welcome to our 18th episode of the Advancing Vietnam podcast series, and I look forward to delving into this consequential topic for investors in Vietnam, considering the difficult situation we are facing at the moment with the movement restrictions in the current lockdown.
Great to be with you again, Vlad, and it is a complicated and difficult time, and let's have a chat this morning and go through this.
Matthew, with companies active in Vietnam impacted by the current Covid-19 situation and facing structural and operational complications, it is important to be able to maintain compliance and ensure their business continuity plan is sustainable. Therefore, businesses need to have in place a clear corporate governance framework covering all levels of compliance and operational strategy. Let's start first with the most important resource for enterprises in Vietnam, the people, the employees, essentially. How do companies support their staff, and what would be the best practice of managing the situation from an employer's perspective?
Yeah, well, you're starting with probably the most complicated question that exists, how to solve and how to deal with something that we haven't had to experience before, and that is impacting employers, employees, and everyone in this sort of employment generally. So this idea of what employers do is to, in my view, maintain staffing, maintain employment as best you can. Because when you come out of this, you don't want to have to be re-recruiting, you don't want to have to be finding staff, you want to keep resources. Now that's easy to say, there is a financial cost. Some businesses are really struggling, have no income, have had to let staff go, others are doing reasonably well, most are somewhere in between. We do see significant amounts of layoffs and employees without jobs. We see massive lockout of people into different provinces where they can't be where they want to be, and this is really upsetting. What to do with employees from an employer perspective is, as I said, protect. There may be situations you may have to go on minimum salary, may have to decrease salaries, and a negotiation with staff, in our experience, generally comes up with the best result. So we're finding those employees who engage with staff are open and honest, have that discussion, revise salaries if there is reduced work or no work, and just get to an agreement that everyone knows what's happening. Your staff loyalty, because of that, and your loyalty to staff will work for you in the future. As things start opening up in Vietnam, we're going to find people in the wrong place. We're going to find people are locked out. We're going to find people are still going to have to work from home. We're going to find there's going to be complications, and there's going to be labour shortages in certain sections. And you don't want to be the one, so keep that engagement with staff. There is reductions in social insurance payments, there's deferrals of tax payments, there's a range of things that can be accessed, which may not be large amounts of money in total payroll, but they are benefits to employers that you can use. The other one is that what we've encouraged is sending out care packs, sending out just things that you can do for employees. And for many, that's not an additional cost. That cost is something you would have paid in the office anyway, had you been in the office or running normal businesses. So that looking after them and to buying that little bit of credibility with staff that you do care. Because most employers do. They want their staff looked after. What we have to be careful of is simply keeping staff on the books where there's no likelihood of needing them in the future, because that gives staff the wrong impression, and it also means that you're on the wrong footing for what you're trying to do and being disingenuous to everyone. You're stopping them from finding something else if you really really can't re-employ, if you're not going to reopen your shops, if there's something business is not going to continue. So there has to be an honest discussion with yourself and your employees, but having that discussion, working out a path forward, is the basis of how you look after them in these difficult times.
Right. And moving onwards to the second, let's say, most important element of this corporate governance, especially during this time, the compliance calendar. We always advise businesses to maintain a compliance calendar and ensure they follow the correct lodgements dates and reporting schedules with the authorities. Why is this important, and what are the latest updates in regards to lodgements of documents with the authorities in the major cities?
So unlike that first question where I talked about more general things, less legalistic, and the labour law is quite vague when it comes to pandemics and how you can negotiate and minimum salaries, what you're talking about on compliance is factually a legal basis. Now, compliance is important. There are some exemptions for lodgements of certain things if during pandemic, and some default for example, tax payments. Their penalties aren't being applied, but they will apply interest still, but penalties won't be applied. That said, many agencies for ongoing activities will accept electronic where they may not in the past. Your compliance still needs to be done. And even if your business is paused, that doesn't necessarily negate the compliance obligations. So having someone who is still maintains responsibility and make sure things are lodged is critical. You don't want to get, for those, if interest, you don't want to get penalties if penalties apply. You don't want to be that company that can't repatriate profits later on because you didn't pay a penalty, which is one of the implications. You don't want to be the director trying to travel into the future and they don't let you because you have tax liabilities or payments to the state that are due and they block you from leaving. The company doesn't want to have refunds for VAT blocked because you haven't paid and settled your obligations to the state. So understanding what those obligations are and meeting them. Now, there are some deferrals, and the law has given certain deferrals, so there are tax payment deferrals. If you meet certain criteria on size or industry, you've got to make sure you apply in time to meet those deferrals. You don't get them automatically. You must make sure you apply. So developing this compliance calendar is important. So to go on to a more generic, and we don't have specific guidance, is this move to digital and online. We have seen historically this announcements of authorities seeking to move, or electronic signatures for tax lodgements and tax token. That's being extended now. We are seeing that being used more by authorities accepting a digital version and not requiring the hard copy immediately, or will defer that until afterwards. We are seeing a lot of this. We are looking for more guidance from the authorities as they realise that digital does work, where we can move away from paper. In some cases, paper is still required, but they will process everything based on the digital or the scanned lodgement. There is still certain situations where you must stamp something, and you're not going to get around that in the short term, but this is the movement we're seeing. So to come back to this, schedules and lodgements, you must comply is the answer. There may be exceptions, but many of those exceptions are by application prior to a certain date.
And for those who are listening, Matthew, we actually have an updated compliance calendar on our website for 2021 and moving across to 2022. It's free to download, so feel free to check our website, vietnam.acclime.com, and download our resource there and other elements that you find important. Moving forward then with the next question, which I think it's quite interesting that you mentioned already about digital transformation for the government. There's a lot of information out there about how companies in distress adopt digital transformation and in general digital strategies to shift their business models towards more productive market verticals or online channels. Some of your clients at Acclime have adopted certain digital strategies to supplement or adjust their traditional business models. Can you share some examples of best practices of implementing digital transformation strategies for businesses in Vietnam?
Best practice is it's an interesting concept because you can look at this in many ways. We have seen that digital transformation. So to step back, Vietnam has been very e-commerce focused in recent times, but it's been a lot of cash transactions. We saw that people were, Vietnam's very Facebook and very internet connected. What we have seen in the pandemic has changed is this rapid complete business transformation. The government is moving. businesses is this evolution. This online payments is now becoming the predominant source, and the contactless payments, where that was not the case pre-pandemic. So we have seen a movement, and businesses need to adapt and change with that. So we've seen those who were selling to B2C moving to B2B and saying, well, I've got to go direct to customers during pandemic. How do I do that? I need to be prepared. And in fact, I can move that from an online B2C as well, where before it may have been an offline, here's an order form, fill it in and I'll deliver something from my warehouse. That same channel means that the B2C and B2B are all online. It's making stock purchasing. And I've got one client, for example, who has decreased their headcount, not because they need to reduce because of turnover, because they just redundant roles now, this B2C. When the pandemic sort of starts decreasing and their business picks up, they'll be able to grow and employ more, but have a lower headcount cost for their business and less mistakes, less extra stock counting, less processing manual order forms. E-commerce does present issues because you do need to register websites and get approvals and extra sub-licenses, and it's a cost of business and it's a process must go through. But also digitizing and looking to use digital signatures where you can, looking to make sure that you have access in different locations around the world for doing things offline before this concentration of one person, one stamp, one location. You can have multiple individuals, multiple authorizations. Banking is changing as well, where banks are accepting scanned documents in lieu of originals as well, but that needs to be part of your business protocols. So this moving models towards this online, so payments, the way we do payments, the petty cash doing transactions, even just the way we have restrictions in right now in Vietnam in distributing things and using couriers. Well, digitization has helped that as part of business models. So B2C, B2B online, doing fully interactions, doing automated instead of doing manual forms, the contactless payments and all to the financial verticals, education, moving education offline, online from offline, and doing models to help people and adapt now, which will be sustainable once things go back to a more normal situation, whatever that might mean, but is sustainable, and these things will stick. So that's I see that as where we're going for this transformation. Now, every business has an element of these things. They may be slightly different, but having another thing is having laptop computers, having an understanding of work from home and how that's a core part of your business going forward may reduce rental costs, and that may shift a business to be much more flexible on a staffing, on a family, on a work from the whole work from home. Using that as a catalyst to making a flexible workplace may give you productivity gains as well. So using all of these things right now in Vietnam as a shift, as the government shift and as all other businesses and consumer expectations shift, gives you a position where you can be sort of ready for the next phase and not left behind.
The government has put forward a series of policies to support enterprises and individuals alike in these difficult moments, looking at tax deferments, tax reductions, social insurance deferments, and various types of allowances for employees. Can you share more about these support actions from the authorities?
So there was Decree 23 and then Decision 68, which were issued to support businesses. We're expecting more. There's been a number. There are specific city level or provincial level in support as well. So you've got to separate. There's a range of support activities. Some have been successful, some haven't been so far, and there will be more by the time this podcast is out. There will likely be further releases. But right now you have a reduction in the Social Security by a small amount, so it decreases you're not paying the workplace accident insurance basically, and you're supposed to use that for costs for staff and other COVID costs. So you've got a slight reduction. You have a deferral in paying trade union for a period of time. So as an employer, I've got those reductions. You have the ability for individuals to receive government payments if they don't have employment. They can seek to have and the amount varies up to 3 million dong, 1.5 to 3 million dong, about per month, or as a one-off payment in respect to loss of employment or just generally being disadvantaged because of the COVID process. There's also abilities to get a grant for companies in respect of training. So if you're going to do a training program, you can actually get a 1.5 million dong a month support package to retrain and assist staff. There are loans. So the Social Policy Bank will give loans to companies. They're not easy to get. There have not been a lot, but the interest-free loans are available. So these packages exist, and it was quite a expensive package that was put out by the authorities. Very fragmented in many ways, and it was more about, in my personal opinion, helping on the fringes. It wasn't the huge amounts of benefits. There were tax deferrals early in the year, and we're expecting further tax deferrals or tax reductions for medium, small businesses and certain sectors. I'm personally expecting larger tax benefits to come through for all businesses in Vietnam to try to encourage business expenditure. So what I'm saying is that, yes, there has been a lot, but I don't think that, and businesses should look at those and take advantage of them, but I don't think they're the be-all and end-all now. They are on the fringes, and I'm waiting for the next one to see what else we can have as a complete package to use. But final thing is, for your salary calculations, please make sure that you've reduced your payment amounts and the payment rates in respect of trade union and social insurance to reflect those changes from 1 July. And that's something that all employers could check to make sure that they're not overpaying and they're keeping some of that cash flow they're not required to give to the authorities at this stage. I do note that deferrals always have a cash impact later. So I'm looking personally for reductions, not deferrals as my first preference. Deferrals are good, but there's a cash cost. I want reductions to help businesses, and that's what we're looking for from the government, more of those reductions to come out.
Mm-hmm. Certain sectors in particular have been experiencing disruptions in their operations more than others. To name a few, manufacturing, logistics, hospitality, F&B, and others. However, other market verticals such as fintech, e-commerce, digital services, digital payments in general are experiencing pivotal gains, not just in Vietnam, but across entire Southeast Asia. From your experience, how will the growth in these latter sectors evolve, and what will be the impact on the Vietnamese economy?
So we talked about earlier about that there has been a shift. So those verticals you've mentioned, the e-commerce, the fintech and digital services, they will grow and they'll stick. So we've seen that fundamental change for the historically e-commerce, lack of trust. Will I get what I bought? I'm not paying until I see it, until I touch it. What if they don't deliver? What if they don't have it in stock? So we've seen that I'll pay cash on delivery to make sure I get it and inspect it. 2, I'm not touching cash now. This digital payment and this comfortable confidence. People are now realizing, like most parts in the world, digital payment's the way to go. It's much easier, simpler, less risks. For a business, that's so much better than not having to track where my cash is, which delivery driver, which third-party company, will they return my money? So this is the evolution we're seeing, and this is a permanent change. These changes in how services are delivered and what people want, what they're comfortable with, that's a mindset shift it's happened. Regardless, we won't go back to where we were. So the businesses that are impacted, when they come back out of this, so the F&B businesses really embracing the verticals you've talked about to tell you, I'm going to restart my business, I'm going to promote it online, I'm going to use delivery, I'm going to use packaged goods, I'm going to use frozen. I'm a F&B restaurant, I'm making food, I'm going to sell frozen versions and packaged versions as well as my normal, because people are comfortable with that, this buy and use at home. So adapting and using that will be a fantastic opportunity, but not letting go of what made you successful before, because the tourism, the F&B, manufacturing, that's still going to be in demand. It's still going to need it the way it was, but you've got extra opportunities and you need to adapt to consumer changes. Manufacturing and logistics will bounce back. It's a pain globally at the moment and will remain a pain. It will bounce back. We're seeing, just as an aside, I saw reference to certain very large global big box stores chartering ships and buying their own containers as it's cheaper and more accessible than trying to use the logistics system as a broken at the moment. And even if they don't get those containers used again, it's still cheaper to discard than trying to fit into the system. This will change back, but requiring a different way to do your business and adapting to these changes is going to be important for the future. The last part I'll say, just of how it's going to change the economy, is this much more digitized, much more forward-thinking business that is internationally aligned, instead of Vietnam sort of having some restrictions in just expectations and local practices, will set us in good stead as we move forward. The ASEAN opportunities and the Asia opportunities that Vietnam presents, we will stand out into the future. Those things, those manual lodgements that we talked earlier, the manual payments were a restriction. That's going to disappear, and we're going to be much more advanced and opportunities were much more pronounced going forward.
Mm-hmm. And what is the overall investor sentiment towards Vietnam at the moment, in your opinion? And what do you think the growth story as the Vietnamese economy is going to prevail and continue to attract investors in the medium to long term?
Yeah, I struggle with this a little bit, trying to sort of see where we sit. We are still seeing market entry continue without really slowing down. Foreign investors see these current COVID issues in Vietnam as something the world has faced, most countries have faced, and they've got past. And they see that Vietnam will get past it. So we're seeing that coming in. We're not seeing lots of money come in at the moment. They're waiting for borders to open until they put the money and build a new factory. But this idea of we need to be in Vietnam. So the sentiment's there. If COVID drags on, it may wane a little bit. We're seeing the domestic sentiment very depressed. We don't know what that means for the domestic investor. Vietnam's been driven by exports, driven by the foreign invested sector, which is 73 or 75% of exports are coming out of the foreign sector. So it very much is going to be how fast we bounce back. But the longer this COVID situation goes on, the harder it's going to be to get that bounce back to occur. To medium long term, Vietnam's going to have to play the cards very carefully to make sure that is maintained, because if we don't, the negative sentiment in the domestic economy and the impacts of the controlling COVID that we've had to go through may weigh on the global sentiment. So having the military in the streets trying to distribute food and help out with law and order in Ho Chi Minh City, sort of protect the stay at home and stop people from mingling in the streets, may be there with good intentions, but if that's not portrayed or not accepted in international media as the right way to go, that's going to be the issues to be faced. So it is going to be very dependent on how fast and what the government does, back to earlier questions about incentives, etc., what they do, how do they make it attractive, and how does Vietnam bounce out compared to other nations who are similarly facing problems, the Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, those sort of countries, Cambodia right now, Thailand, who are all in various phases of reopening and various phases of vaccinations and COVID issues and supply chain problems as well. It's, I think, something we'll look back in a number of months' time and see how close we were with our guesses, but it is a tough one. What I will say to foreign investors is that Vietnam will remain foreign investor friendly. It has a reliance on investors. As I said, 73% of all exports are from the foreign invested sector, and this is where, and the opportunities domestically are going to be there. This could be a chance to step in if the local investors are not confident, and you want to take a position and bring something into market. It may be the perfect time to consider that.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. As usual, Matthew, I appreciate your practical insights. Unfortunately, our time is up, but I look forward to speaking again for our next podcast very soon.
Thank you, Vlad. Always enjoy talking to you, and have a great day.
In these challenging times under COVID, it is important for investors to maintain a consistent compliance schedule and support their people as the most important asset of a business. There are also significant opportunities, as you mentioned before, in certain sectors and industries enable investors to take advantage of the market through digital transformations. So under these conditions, we advise investors to stay alert, be flexible, and be prepared to take advantage of market opportunities as they arise. And many thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in to Advancing Vietnam podcast series. For more information about this topic, please check out our publications on vietnam.acclime.com. And if you want to reach out to us for any additional details, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn or throughout the website contact details.